Welcome to Something to Wrestle With.
Something to Wrestle With.
Bruce Prichard.
Bruce Prichard.
Well, you know.
So let's talk about why we're here. It feels like we have been building to this moment as we're over an hour into the show. The match that changed everything. The Undertaker gets a win over Mankind. It officially goes about 16 minutes in this Hell in a Cell match. I don't know. I mean, there's no way for us to really just talk about the match without talking about everything that led up to it and the memories of the match. And I feel like now's one of those times where I'm just going to I'm going to lay out and I'm going to let you talk about this from everything that was happening sort of behind the scenes that week. And then I'll chime in, because this is one of those stories that people have been asking about for a long time. I mean, Mick Foley has made this part of his tour all year, the 20 Years of Hell tour. He's been doing comedy clubs across the nation. And I think he's even going to take it to Australia later. And it's all about this match, really. It's maybe the most famous match in company history, certainly in this era. I mean, you could say Andre Hogan was bigger, but that was a little before my time. Here, this is as big as it was. I mean, people are still making references to it in a way they don't talk about any other match. So let's start from the beginning. When did you first hear that they were going to do Hell in a Cell, and sort of take us through all of this?
Well, leading up to it, there was a lot of talk about doing, at the time it was Mankind and Stone Cold for the championship. And this would have been, had we gone with that match, it would have been, I believe, the third time that Steve and Mick Foley would have worked. And I just don't think that
in a row on pay-per-view.
Yeah. And there wasn't I don't want to say there wasn't any confidence in it, but Vince McMahon didn't feel that attraction for a third time was what we needed. And he wanted to do something different. He wanted to shake it up, and he wanted to do unpredictable in something nobody would ever call, which is what they did with Kane. So leading up to that, then you get to the point of, okay, then what the hell do you do with Mick? We've been building Mick with Steve, and then now Undertaker really doesn't have a dancing partner. So I think it was Vince McMahon who was like, why not do, Mankind and Taker one more time, put him in the cage and put him in the confines of this monstrous cage and have that epic fucking match.
Well, it's also mentioned, Foley wrote about this, of course, in his book, that Russo breaks the news to him, quote, "Cactus, we're just concerned the audience won't buy another match with you and Steve." And originally this was supposed to be the blow off with Mankind Austin in the cage. So Mankind sort of assumes, okay, well, I'm out of the cell, and he gets good news from Russo. Oh no, you're still in the cell. They're just going to do it with the Undertaker. But in Mankind's mind, Mick Foley's mind at the time, he's got to be not overjoyed with that either, because he went from working with the tippy top guy who's got a staph infection to now the not as hot guy, but still a major guy, but a guy you've had 6 pay-per-view matches with. And oh, by the way, he can't walk. He's got a jacked up ankle.
Right. And I think that Mick kind of felt, what the hell do I do now? And both guys, Taker felt the same way. Taker kind of felt like, what else do we have to do that we haven't already done? And you put him in the cell, and now that raises expectations, as, there had been this Shawn Michaels and Undertaker great cell match that everybody is raving about. How do you top that? And that was Mick Foley's mindset, is how in the fuck do I top what Undertaker did with Shawn Michaels? So as legend has it, I believe, and I'd always thought it was a lot of Mick Foley, but it was Mick Foley and Terry Funk going back and just talking about, what the hell can we do? What can I do to make this match different? How do we take this to the next level? And the funny thing was Mick, after watching the match, was kind of like, there's nothing we can do. What the fuck? How do you top this match? And as legend has it, it was Terry Funk that said to him, start the match on top of the cage.
Which you would think when you hear that, where the fuck do we go from there? You know, if we're starting on top, where do we go from there? Now, if you haven't watched the first Hell in a Cell, you really should go watch that, because Undertaker Shawn Michaels really set a new precedent. I know you hate it, but Meltzer gave it 5 stars, and that match is tremendous. We've covered it in our archive, somethingtowrestle.com. And even Mankind would write in his book that when he watched this match with Terry, that Terry said, "Cactus, that's going to be difficult to beat." And so he suggests starting at the top. And I think everybody naturally thinks, well, where do you go from there?
Goddamn kid, just get on the top of the fucking cage. Start it up there. Make that big bastard chase you. Well, not only where the hell do you go from there? My first question when I'm hearing is, how the fuck do you even get there at the beginning? You got to get there at some point. And when I heard what they had laid out, it's kind of like, okay, then what? You throw him off the cage. He takes this great bump. That should be the end. That's the finish. Where the fuck do you go from there? And when Mick says, we're going to climb back up and go back up to the top, but you just got thrown off through a fucking table. Then what? We're going to go through the cage. Wait a minute. You're starting on top of the cage. You're getting thrown off. Then you're going to climb back on top of the cage. You can completely kill the bump that you just fucking took.
Yep.
And then you're going to go through the fucking cage.
Yep.
To the ring.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't fucking get it. But as they laid it out and you start talking about it, the way when you tell somebody, like I just told you, it's like, okay, start on top. Bam, we're going to have a fight on top of the cage. I've got a fucking chair. King Cancun, boom, big bump off the fucking top. Boom, go carry him out. You come down off the cage. They think I'm done. I come back, jump up on the fucking top of the cage. We go again. This time, you choke slam me through the fucking cage. It doesn't make sense. However, when you watch how they did it and the time, when Mick Foley took the initial bump, the first bump off the top of the fucking cell, he didn't move. He just laid there like a sack of shit and did not fucking move. Jim Ross's call on that was, oh my God, he's broken in half. Good God, he's broken in half. You believed it. And the way they shot it and got off of it, shot it and got off of it, because it gave you the impression that, oh my God, he's not moving. He could very well be dead. And that was a scary thing. And Mick took it so damn well that no one really knew, other than Terry when he got down there and made sure he was okay. But Mick separated his fucking shoulder on the bump. And he thought that was, well, that's okay. I just separated my shoulder. Then they go through and everybody talks about all that, the bump. Everybody thinks that bump from the top of the cage through the table, what a horrific bump is. The bump, the scary bump, the bad bump was the bump he took off the top of the cage onto that fucking concrete ring that we used to have. And that wasn't supposed to happen that way either. The original idea behind the bump in the ring was when they got back up to the top of the cage, that they fought on top of the cage until Taker picks Mick up and goes to slam him through the cage. And when he choke slams him, a little bit of the cage gives, and you see it give. And Taker looks down, and Mick's there, and he picks Mick back up, takes him back up again, and choke slams him a second time. And more of the cage gives. and the people are watching and they're seeing the cage start to sink from the top, and Foley's body weight is starting to come down and shit. And Taker reaches over and fucking on that third time, hopefully. And now he crashes through, but it wouldn't have been the bump from the top of the cage. It would have been probably about the equivalent of maybe right about the top rope of the cage by the time for the third time. And the thought was that cage would have broken his fall. Well, everybody saw what happened. First time, the cage was gimmicked, and it didn't break away like they thought it would. It just went. And add on top of that, there's the chair being up on the cage panel that Mick took the bump through and just followed Mick right down and smashed right into his face, knocked his teeth out. It was brutal. And anybody that's taken a bump in those old WWF rings, they were the stiffest things. I'd rather take a bump on the concrete than those old rings. So it was a little snug.
Man.
And Taker's standing up there thinking, oh shit. He ain't moving again. So here comes Terry Funk. Here comes the doctors. Here comes the referee, and everybody's trying to talk to Mick. And Mick is out of it. Completely out of it, but he's going on just pure adrenaline at this point, telling everybody, no, I'm okay. I'm okay. And once Taker up on top kind of gets a sign that it's like, okay, he's okay. And Taker jumps down, and you see him, he's favoring that ankle pretty good when he jumps down from the top of the cage. But to give Mick even more time to get his bearings, Terry Funk fed in and got chokeslam right out of his shoes, which, again, thank God for Terry Funk being down there. But a lot of that shit, like Vince coming down to check on Mick, that wasn't part of it. Vince was genuinely concerned. Like, is he okay? I have to know. And wanted to be there. It was some scary shit because we really didn't know. He's moving, and I'm talking to people and saying, is Mick okay? And they're going, yeah, he says he's fine. You can't be fine after that. I don't give a fuck who you are or what you are. But, man, they continued on with the match and went another little while, including thumbtacks, which the line of the night for me after the match was Mick Foley coming up to me and apologizing to me for forgetting the thumbtack spot.
Oh.
Said, I'm so sorry, Bruce. I totally forgot the thumbtacks. I'm so sorry. But other than that, was it okay? Now he's got thumbtacks stuck all over him. I said, Mick, you got the thumbtacks in. He says, I did? Like, you got the thumbtacks in, man. He goes, oh, okay, good.
Ages.
Probably early in that week. But again, the one bump going off the cage onto the announce table, I guess was as safe as you can make something like that. And the second bump was meant to be something else. And that was something that just went wrong.
It was supposed to be work at it. And then it finally gives, and he is hanging on as it falls, not just breaking it through.
Right. Because nobody would have no one in their right mind would ever take that bump from the top of the cage like that.
Well, it is something that people still talk about because a lot of people debated, well, you can see the zip ties. Clearly it was supposed to break, but you're saying not like that. It was supposed to break, but in time, not on the very first contact with it.
Correct. It was supposed to gradually give until like about the third choke slam to where he would finally go through, but the cage would be breaking his fall along the way.
You know, what's weird is when I watched this match back this week, it's the first time I watched it in a long time. And I guess I'm just getting older now, and it sort of clicked in my brain. Like, what if he missed that table? It's not like earlier in the day. You know, I know sometimes before a big pay-per-view, if somebody's like, oh, I want you to do like a reverse power bomb or something, they do a walkthrough. There's no walking through, throwing yourself off the fucking cage. Like you're just doing it. And It's not, I mean, I know that he had had a lot of experience jumping off the ring apron to the concrete floor. I get it, but the distance you're going, the height you're up, you know, and it's not like you got a spot on the concrete you're really trying to hit. If you get a little bit of a guy or you get all of a guy, it doesn't matter. I mean, this is different. This is much higher and something he's never done before. What if he missed? What if he hit the people? You know, the Spanish announce team. What if he hit the guardrail? What if he hit the concrete? Mick Foley could very easily be dead from that spot, or certainly paralyzed.
Well, and Mick was in complete control of the bump the whole way. So at that point, you have to look at him and have the confidence in him to either do it or not. And he's the one that's taking the risk, and he's the one that has looked at it and feels that he can pull this off. We had the table.
A lot of confidence, and I get when you're saying he's in control. I understand that Undertaker's not throwing him off, but I am saying you're leaving it up to a guy's judgment to hope that he's right on something he's never done before. And if he's wrong, you've just had a death on pay-per-view, like a horrific accident on pay-per-view.
You can say that about any bump, and you can say that about anything. And unfortunately, there have been horrific accidents that have happened on much simpler bumps. So that's every day those guys take that risk.
Let me ask you.
And it was a risk, and I think everybody knew it was a risk.
This is a weird question I ask. If the Owen accident had happened before this, there's no chance this bump happens, right?
I don't think so. No.
It's just weird to think about how so much of everything changes after those two things, you know, this bump, and which is obviously scripted, and then a very real tragedy. But really, a couple of things go differently here, and this could have been totally different. In his book, Foley wrote about this, that Cactus was sort of pitched this idea jokingly by Funk. Maybe you should start on top and just let him throw you off. And he says it jokingly, and Foley sort of jokes back. Oh, and then I can climb back up and he can throw me off again. And eventually he decides, wait, I think I can really do this. And he spends the next week or two trying to pitch the Undertaker on let's starting up top, and Undertaker shoots it down every time. And then eventually he says to Cactus, why are you so intent on killing yourself up there? And Foley wrote that he answered, because I'm afraid the match is going to stink. You can't walk, and let's face it, I don't have any heat. We've got a heck of a legacy to live up to, and I don't want this match to ruin it. If we start out hot enough, we can make the people think we had one hell of a match, even if we didn't. Eventually, the Undertaker comes around to the idea. Did you have a conversation with Undertaker about climbing to the top of the cage with this hurt foot and then throwing a motherfucker off? Because even though we understand wrestling and Foley's really he's gonna do it himself, the perception would certainly be different if this went poorly, and it would affect the Undertaker. And this is somebody he cares about, who he's done a lot of business with, who's doing this. Did you have a conversation before or after the match with Undertaker?
Well, I had a lot of conversations with both Mick and Undertaker before the match, and frankly after the match, just thinking, think about what they were trying to top. They were trying to top Shawn Michaels from the middle of the Hell in a Cell, standing on a crossbeam, taking that bump into the announcer's table, which was absolutely spectacular at the time. And Mick feeling he had to top that so that people wouldn't think the match sucked. And that's the part that always would get me. It's like, then what? Okay, then how do we top that? And we found ourselves in that position, to where when Mick and Hunter were on top of the cage and Mick took the bump again through the top of the cage, but we had the ring gimmick so that he went through it and it was completely safe. And we did practice that, and we did make sure that went as planned beforehand. But it's crazy, man. It was a different business, and guys, a lot of times they look at that, and like you look at Mick Foley's legacy, and that's in so many ways, that's his legacy. That bump, that night, fact that he kept going and he was out of it, and the fact that, you know, when he comes back, he convinces all of us, no, got my bell rung, but I'm okay. I can go out, my shoulder's out, but the doctor popped it back in. I'm fine. It's an easy spot that I got to go out and do with Steve. I've got it. I'm fine. That wouldn't happen today either.
No, we haven't even gotten to that part. It's just crazy to think about that he came back out. He does sort of freestyle in the book that, quote, I had missed the monitors, which was my biggest concern. Can you imagine if he'd have hit the fucking monitor? It never even crossed my mind until I read that in the book again this week.
Well, the way that the monitors were in there for that, and if the top had been off, that would have been an issue, but that part of it was actually safe because of the way they were positioned. There was no monitor in the middle, and they were on the outside, and they were gimmicked to go. And then later on, guys would get rid of them, which I always thought was silly. Why would you if you're going to put a guy through a table, why are you throwing the monitors out of the way for a smooth, nice, even, flat finish or flat bump? If you want to hurt somebody, leave the monitors there. But actually that part of it was really, to me, the least of the worries. To me, the worry was he hits that table and slid, and just slid right off the damn thing. And as you say, either went into the barricade, went into the people. There were just a lot of things, a lot of what ifs that you knock on wood and you thank God didn't happen. And then the shit that was supposed to happen that did, the other bump is like, fuck me. That's crazy.
Foley is critical of the way he took that choke slam, the one that put him through the cage, because he says it's the only time he didn't go high for an Undertaker choke slam. Understandably, he's hurting here. I mean, he had to climb the cage, as you said, with a separated shoulder, which is probably not easy at 300 pounds. And so when he's finally up there, I mean, he just can't get up for him. So he winds up just falling into the cage. But he says that if he had went high, he's worried that he would have over rotated and landed on his head. I mean, it's just unbelievable. I mean, it's to the point that Foley even wrote in his book, he asked the Undertaker, hey, what'd you think when you looked down from the top of the cage and saw me on the mat? And he says, Undertaker didn't skip a beat and said, I thought you were dead. That's just
scared shitless.
And what's weird too is, when the Undertaker finally gets down there, he says, Jack, let's go home. And Foley wrote that he said, no, I'm okay. Which is just amazing.
Right.
He's so out of it. He's even asking the referee, was I already on the stretcher once tonight? Yes. I mean, obviously we don't know back then what we know now about head injuries. I mean, this would never happen, but it's just unbelievable. And you even referenced the whole, sorry, I forgot the thumbtacks thing. When he comes to the back, is there like a standing ovation? What's the reaction when he comes through the curtain? I mean, this is something like out of a movie.
Yeah. Taker and Vince were right there for him and just hugged him. And it was definitely a standing ovation because it was an unbelievable performance. And people were concerned, first of all, for his well-being, thinking, how in the hell is he walking? How did he get up? When he had the tooth up his nose.
Crazy.
Well, we thought it was snot.
What's funny?
We thought it was a big loogie.
I watched this match this week and my person saw it for the first time. And she said, is that his tooth in his nose? Yes.
Yeah. We thought it was snot at first.
How did it get there? The hard way. It's crazy.
Right through his lip.
This person's still alive. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's I like to point, as much as I love Mick, I like to point to some of the things Mick has done to young guys and say, you don't need to do this. And Mick didn't need to do it. He really didn't.
You know, when he's in the back, and I guess we should talk about him because we have it here. You guys had like a chiropractor that people have asked a lot of questions about over the years, who was help adjusting guys. What's his role here in trying to put Humpty Dumpty back together again?
Francois Petit. And Francois Petit he was a hybrid of a chiropractor, a kinesiologist. He did a lot of different crazy things, but a lot of athletes with unique injuries would often go to Francois, and he would put them back together, manipulate their joints and their bones and everything. And, man, I've never been adjusted by anybody like Francois. I mean, he would hurt you. It hurt, but afterwards you felt better. And he we called him Dr. Petit or Francois. He was Sub-Zero in the, Mortal Kombat movie franchise. And he was a stunt coordinator, things like that. More than anything, he was pretty much a crazy motherfucker, but he would pop guys back into place. I broke my ankle one time. He set my ankle, wrapped it, and I was done. And I could walk on the damn thing. He was amazing like that. It was hard to explain. There were stories about him doing, okay, now don't laugh, him doing open heart surgery on people and repairing arteries without obviously opening them up, just with his hands. And he would go in and do bypass surgery on people. That's real life.
What the fuck are you talking about?
Yeah. Yeah. Those were the legends of Francois Petit, but guys would go and they would spend a couple days at his place in California. And that's how, we came about him, because he was putting people back together. And we thought, well, instead of having guys go to him, let's bring him to us. And those that want to use him can use him as a chiropractor and to help them with their injuries and help them rehab and different things like that. So, but he could pop a shoulder back in. It was always like, let me reduce it. I can reduce it. And I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? Vince Russo was a big fan of old Francois. Russo would go out and spend vacation and weeks out with Francois in California, and tells a great story about Francois racing Warren Beatty on the Sunset Strip somewhere in California. But he was this crazy doctor. The real doctor that we had was Dr. Frank Romascavage, and that was the guy with the long hair at the very end of it. And they point him out. That's Dr. Romascavage. He was the real doctor that was there that actually stitched Mick up. And
14 stitches in the lip he got. And I assume that's also who's pulling the thumbtacks out of his person.
That was Dr. Romascavage and Francois both. Yeah. With pliers, little needle nose pliers, one by one.
That's what we're talking about right here. So there's even footage of McMahon going to congratulate him and thank him for everything he's done for the company. But he says something like, promise me I'll never see you do anything like that again. Did you have a conversation with Vince after the match, or do you remember what the interaction was? I mean, it feels like there's some sort of edict that has to come down. Like, we've let this shit go too far. No more.
Well, not only yes, there was, and it was also Vince recalling one of the reasons that he didn't want to hire Cactus Jack in the first place was because of the stuff that Cactus used to put his body through, and that Vince felt was unnecessary. So the fact that Vince let him do that, and he's kind of looking at himself in the mirror and says, damn it, we can't, I mean, he took responsibility for it. He goes, I can't let him do that to himself anymore. So it was brutal. A lot of soul searching.
And we're not done. As if that's not enough. Kane's out next, and he's taking on Steve Austin in a first blood match. Now, this is interesting because it's a first blood match, and one of the guys is completely covered. Arms, legs, hands, face. It's a first blood match. And the other guy, while he is the hottest star in the business, he's just spent 3 days in the hospital. Pretty crazy to think about. Vince McMahon is watching this from the owner's box with Sable on his arm. And in the middle of the match, the cage starts coming down and it gives the illusion that McMahon is behind it. And eventually, I guess we should mention here, what is the stipulation? If Kane doesn't win his world title shot here, obviously if Austin loses, Kane becomes world champion. What if Kane loses? What happens?
Bro, we're going to cover him in gasoline and set him on fire. And then he's gone forever. It's a good step.
You help me understand how Vince McMahon co-signs this.
Well, God damn it, pal. We're not going to actually do it. That's how.
I don't understand.
We're not going to do it. God damn. It's entertainment.
It's unbelievable is what it is. You guys had a set a motherfucker on fire step, which is just crazy. The match gets 3.25 stars. There is some fun stuff to watch here. One of the times when the cage is going up, Kane is laying across it, teeter-tottering, which is kind of fun to see a 7-footer do that. They're brawling everywhere. As we mentioned, Austin's fresh out of the hospital. He's got the elbow wrapped up. He's working with a staph infection here. Eventually, unbelievably, Mankind runs down to interfere with a chair. Eventually, the Undertaker shows up too, and he's limping along, and they're playing dueling chairs. And Mankind ducks a chair shot, which causes the Undertaker to hit Austin, who also had a chair. And then immediately Austin does the gimmick, and he is pouring blood like a major, he hit a vein. And in the middle of all this, the Undertaker goes and gets gasoline. This is real life, folks. The Undertaker gets
my
gasoline,
favorite part.
and he doesn't pour it on Kane. He says, fuck this. And he poured it on the Hebners. I don't know if maybe he got the Iggy that the Hebners were making fake merchandise or what, but he poured him full of gasoline. And now Austin's bleeding a river. And eventually everybody gets a stunner and the referee comes to, and you think that Austin's going to win, but he sees Austin pouring blood. It's a first blood match. He calls for the bell. Your winner, new WWE champion, Kane.
Yes. God damn it. Good shit. And actually, when you watch it back, that was some pretty good shit. When you think about the peril that you put your champion in, having a first blood match with a guy that's covered head to toe with a leather mask, none of his extremities are exposed.
Not one.
He's talking with a voice box to his throat.
We could have cut his throat. Maybe. And if he bled there, no shit, the thing went up his neck too. Forgot about that.
Process what you just said. We could have cut his throat. You just flippantly just threw that out there.
Well, it could happen. Doop. So you put your champion in such peril that the odds are astronomical to overcome, but they're not going to put the title on this big red monster. So it was kind of must see. It's a must see event because how do you get out of it? And that's how we got out of it.
Serious business. It is something nobody saw coming. Austin is the hottest act there is. And we should remember, and this is sort of funny too, that it all sort of surrounds the Hell in a Cell. Of course, the Hell in a Cell was first put on the map at Bad Blood in October of 97. The match is Undertaker and Shawn Michaels, and Kane interferes. That's where Kane makes his debut. Now, fast forward 8 months, and what do you know? Undertaker's in a Hell in a Cell, but now the Cell's involved, and he interferes in Kane's match, and Kane becomes world champion. It's weird the way it all sort of ties together, and Paul Bearer is in the middle of all of it. And we see a shot of Vince McMahon as the pay-per-view goes off the air. And it's sort of interesting because Meltzer sort of freestyles that giving that shot to Vince McMahon at the end of the show sort of gives him the credit for the title instead of having all that heat on Kane, Paul Bearer, or the Undertaker. Is he overthinking it?
Yeah, he's overthinking it, but that's where the heat was on Vince. And I think that to me, the most amazing thing about this match and this night is I'm sitting there watching it was old timer. You go, how in the hell do you follow the Hell in a Cell match that we just saw? How do you follow that? And not remembering it all. And I'm watching, man, Kane and Austin came out and had that crowd red hot. They were just on fire, no pun intended, for Stone Cold Steve Austin. They were into every single thing they did. There was no air taken out of the building. The crowd was into it from start to finish, and nobody predicted that outcome that night.
No, I mean, I don't think anybody did. I mean, it is a pretty big moment. I mean, Kane's only been in the company a handful of months. He's the world champion. He's beat the hottest guy. Austin's bleeding like a stuck pig. It's something else, man. I don't even know how to describe this match when you think about all the stuff that's going on, the fucking gasoline and everything in between. And as if that wasn't enough, as crazy as it is, Foley came back out.
Yeah. Yeah. And took a stunner.
Unbelievable. Let's get to Twitter. We asked you to ask some questions about King of the Ring 1998. It's one of the most historic shows in history. So we were not at a loss for questions here, Bruce. Are you ready?
Ready.
John wants to know, how far back was the plan for Kane to have a 1-day title reign? Did they come up with it that day, or was it always the plan to pop a big rating the next night with Austin winning the title back?
Once they booked the match, the way they booked the match, and that was probably about 2 or 3 weeks out, that was the plan.
Efron wants to know, whose idea was it for the cell to come back down during the Austin Kane match?
Originally, I think it was Pat Patterson's idea to bring it back down, thinking that you're going to get a second cell match. What if? And they did it.
Gulage wants to know, how was Steve Austin supposed to draw first blood with Kane since he had a mask and had his entire body covered?
That was the exact question we wanted people to ask. And if anybody could have figured it out, Stone Cold could have.
One of the questions I have,